Welcome to this deep dive on the Scaling Legends podcast. I am Justine, and today we are getting into something that honestly affects every construction business owner looking at the New York market.
Hey everyone, I am Nicole.
Yep.
And this is honestly one of the most pressing issues for contractors right now.
Exactly. We are looking at the New York City Housing Authority today, or NYCHA. And, we really have to start with a stark reality to set the stage here.
Right.
Back in February, during that massive cold snap, a senior citizen literally froze to death in her own apartment at the UPIC6 building up in East Harlem.
Yeah, it was just an absolute tragedy.
It really was. And that happened just 2 weeks after a pipe had burst in that exact same building because of the freezing temperatures. I mean, it sent water cascading through multiple floors.
Right, the heating system there was just a known chronic failure.
And, you hear a story like that, and it sounds like this terrible failure of oversight. But for those of you working in the construction and infrastructure space, it represents something much more complex.
It does. Because NYCHA currently sits on a mind-boggling $78.3 billion repair backlog.
$78 billion. That is with a B.
Exactly. It is simultaneously the single largest construction pipeline in the country and a completely volatile political minefield.
Right, because the political landscape is just shifting violently. You have the Trump administration pushing for massive federal budget cuts to the Department of Housing and Urban Development.
And the entire structure of how public housing is funded is basically being rewritten in real time.
Which means if you are a construction business owner looking at that $78 billion pie, you have to be incredibly strategic.
Oh, absolutely.
So today we are going to look at the mechanical reality of these buildings, the political war over the funding, and most importantly, the survival tactics you need to actually get paid. Because
right now, the traditional government-funded pipeline is drying up. And if you don't know how to pivot your business toward private capital conversions, what we call PCT, you are going to be left holding the bag on delayed contracts.
Right. So, Nicole, to really grasp the risk you're taking on when you bid an NYCHA project, you have to look at the physical decay of the infrastructure, right?
Yes. We are not talking about standard wear and tear here. I was actually analyzing Smart Business Automator's market intelligence report this morning, and the numbers dictate a complete systemic collapse.
Oh, really? How bad is it?
Well, out of that $78.3 billion 20-year projection, $42.1 billion is needed immediately.
Wait, immediately? Like within the year?
Yes, within the next 12 months, just to stabilize the portfolio.
That is just incomprehensible. I mean, let's pause on that. $42 billion needed immediately isn't just a bad year of maintenance.
No, not at all.
You only arrive at a number that astronomical through multi-generational systemic neglect. You get there by ignoring a slow drip until the floor joists literally rot and the ceiling caves in.
You really do. We are talking about over 600,000 outstanding work orders right now.
Oh, wow. 600,000. So if you are a contractor walking into these buildings, you aren't doing a renovation, you are performing emergency triage.
You absolutely are. And the data completely backs up that triage environment. Out of those 600,000 open tickets, 77,000 are specifically for mold and chronic leaks.
Wow.
Yeah, and add to that the elevators. There are over 3,100 elevators across the system, and a huge percentage of them are operating decades past their intended lifespan.
Just chronically trapping residents.
Exactly.
The compliance numbers alone should send a shiver down any estimator's spine. I mean, NYCHA is legally required to hit a 95% compliance rate for mold remediation.
Right. And do you know where they're sitting right now?
I think I saw it was incredibly low.
It is 7.7%.
Wow. Let that sink in. Less than 8% compliance.
Yeah. And the heat outages. Like last October, they spiked to 36 unplanned system-wide heating failures.
Which is crazy because the previous October, there were only 4.
Right. You had 13,000 tenants sitting in single-digit temperatures, wrapped in blankets, plugging in dangerous space heaters just to survive.
And the mechanism of failure here is entirely interconnected, right? Like a failing boiler doesn't just exist in a vacuum.
Exactly. When the heat drops, the pipes freeze and burst.
Yeah.
Then the burst pipes flood the wall cavities.
And then those flooded wall cavities incubate the exact toxic mold crisis we just highlighted.
Right. So as a contractor, you might be hired to just, replace the drywall, but you are stepping into an actively failing ecosystem.
Okay, I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a second, Nicole, because if I am a mid-sized commercial contractor looking at this environment, my instinct is to just walk away.
Yeah, I totally get that.
I mean, we are talking about properties that have a documented history of officials falsifying lead paint inspection records.
Right, which is a massive liability.
And there is a mold class action lawsuit going all the way back to 2013 where the courts had to appoint a special master just to force NYCHA to act.
Yeah, the Baez settlement.
Right. So why on earth would I bid on a site with falsified lead records instead of just taking like a standard commercial office refit? I mean, it is like being hired to renovate a house while the foundation is actively sinking into a swamp.
Well, your instinct to run is exactly why the margins on these jobs have to be calculated so differently. When an estimator looks at an NYCHA bid, they just cannot price it like a standard commercial job.
Right, because the hazard mitigation alone completely changes your labor curve.
Exactly. Because the city has a history of falsified lead records, your crews have to legally treat every single surface as if the hazard is fully present.
So you are dealing with hazmat suits, negative air pressure systems, specialized disposal protocols.
Yeah, and a drastically slower daily output. If your estimator misses the reality of that hazard mitigation, those hidden remediation costs will just completely vaporize your profit margin before the framing even goes up.
And if a contractor is going to take on that massive foundation sinking into a swamp level of operational risk, they need absolute ironclad certainty that the check is actually going to clear.
Right. Which brings us to the core crisis facing the construction pipeline today.
Exactly. Because the entity writing those massive checks is currently caught in a brutal federal tug of war.
Yeah, local city revenue simply doesn't exist to cover a $42 billion immediate shortfall. NYCHA is incredibly reliant on Washington.
Right. And impartially looking at the current legislative landscape, the structure of federal funding is basically being dismantled.
It really is.
I mean, the Trump administration's fiscal year 2026 budget proposes a massive 44% cut to the Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Right, which translates to a $26.7 billion reduction to HUD. That is a massive chunk of money.
Exactly. And then you add in the newly established Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. They have outright canceled multiple active funding streams.
Yeah, like the green retrofit grants and the grants specifically meant for affordable housing developers.
So if you are, say, an HVAC contractor who built your entire 2026 revenue projection around those green energy retrofits, your pipeline basically just evaporated overnight.
And the mechanics of the legislation go even deeper than just cutting top-line numbers. I mean, look at the big, beautiful bill that was signed on July 4, 2025.
Right. That one fundamentally alters the whole mechanism of public housing.
It does. It places a strict 2-year time limit on housing assistance. The projection is that up to 316,000 NYCHA residents could actually lose their housing under these new rules.
Now, obviously, Congress has pushed back aggressively on this. During the recent budget negotiations, lawmakers fought to add money back into the HUD coffers.
True, but even with that congressional intervention, the nationwide operating aid for public housing is still down by $477 million.
And the capital fund, which pays for the heavy construction and infrastructure overhauls, that is reduced by $210 million.
Right. And when you read a quote from NYC Councilmember Chris Banks calling this a doomsday scenario for public housing, period.
Yeah.
You have to translate that political rhetoric into business reality.
Exactly. For a contractor, a doomsday scenario at the agency level means the entire procurement system freezes.
Yeah, the money just stops.
Right. Let's actually walk through the timeline of how a federal budget standoff hits a construction crew down in Brooklyn.
Yeah, that is a great point. So NYCHA depends on federal HUD funding for roughly 75% of its total budget.
Exactly. So if you are a contractor, say, doing a $5 million window replacement job, and Washington freezes that HUD allocation, the domino effect is just brutal.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
NYCHA doesn't get their quarterly disbursement, which means your approved requisition just, sits on a desk.
Right. Your standard 30-day invoice ages out to 60 days, then 90 days, then like 120 days.
And while that invoice is aging out, you still have 40 union carpenters on your payroll who expect a check every Friday.
Yeah, and you still have material suppliers demanding payment for the glass and framing you already installed.
Right, so the money stops flowing from the top, but the expenses at the bottom, they just never pause. You get completely squeezed in the middle.
Which is exactly why you, as a business owner, have to utilize specific survival tactics to bridge that cash flow gap.
Right.
A lot of contractors severely misunderstand the Small Business Administration, or SBA.gov, loan programs.
They really do. People always assume an SBA disaster loan is only for when a hurricane physically rips the roof off your warehouse.
Right. But they also offer economic injury disaster loans and working capital loans specifically designed for this type of disruption.
Yeah, the mechanism of an economic injury loan is vital here. If your primary revenue stream is chipped off because a federal budget standoff halts your government contracts, you can use these SBA working capital loans.
Exactly. You use them to make payroll and keep your skilled labor force intact. You do not want to lay off your best foreman just because politicians are fighting over a budget.
Right, only to try and rehire them 6 months later when the funding finally clears. The loan bridges the gap.
But, playing defense with loans isn't a long-term strategy. To play offense, you have to audit where the money is actually coming from before you bid.
Exactly. And right now, the state of New York has $1.2 billion locked in specifically for NYCHA repairs.
So that state money is secure for the moment. But let's be realistic. Albany cannot shoulder a $78 billion burden by itself.
No, those state funds are essentially a one-time Band-Aid.
Right. So if your current contract is backed by that secure state money, you are safe for this quarter. But if your prospective bids are waiting on delayed HUD allocations, you need to pivot your estimators immediately.
Which brings up the big question. If the traditional public funding pipeline is paralyzed, where does a smart construction business owner point their resources?
You follow the private capital. And in the public housing sector, that means a massive strategic pivot toward PAS-ET conversions.
Right. PAS-ET stands for Permanent Affordability Commitment Together. And to understand why this is the only growing pipeline, you really have to understand the financial mechanism behind it.
Exactly, because under a PAS-ET conversion, the physical management and the massive deferred renovation of a building are completely turned over to private development partners and private property management companies.
So the funding stack completely changes. Instead of relying on a gridlocked federal HUD budget for capital repairs, PAS-ET projects are funded by private equity.
And commercial bank loans and private developer capital. The public subsidy shifts to a reliable Section 8 voucher. The actual construction dollars are private.
Which completely insulates the construction schedule from Washington's political theater. The money is legally committed and escrowed by private banks before the scaffolding ever goes up.
And the data supports this shift, right? I mean, according to Smart Business Automator's Market Intelligence Report, there is already $7 billion in PAS-ET financing that has closed.
Exactly. That is $7 billion of private capital actively flowing into remediation, mechanical overhauls, and general contracting work right now.
So if you can get your firm position to take on these private-public partnerships, PAS-ET work is arguably the most recession-proof, politically insulated construction in New York City today.
Oh, without a doubt. The renovations are contractually obligated by the private banks to happen on a strict timeline.
But pivoting a mid-sized firm to handle a PAS-ET conversion requires serious operational upgrades. I mean, you can't just walk onto a $100 million private equity-backed job with a pickup truck and a handshake.
No, you need massive bonding capacity.
Yeah.
And you usually need specialized equipment to handle the scale of the hazard mitigation we talked about earlier.
Right, which is where a totally different type of SBA vehicle becomes critical. We mentioned disaster loans for cash flow earlier, but to grow into PAS-ET work, contractors really should be looking at traditional SBA 7A loans.
Yeah, the mechanism of the 7A loan is specifically designed for expansion.
Right. You can use it to, secure the capital needed to increase your bonding limits or buy heavy machinery.
Or scale up your workforce to meet the strict requirements of these private developers.
And while you're scaling for PAS-ET, you should also be hunting for highly specific legislative niches, right? Things that bypass the broader HUD cuts.
Oh, definitely. Like the proposed Goldman bill is a perfect example. It is aiming to provide $225 million annually, earmarked specifically for emergency boiler grants.
Wow. So if you are a mechanical or HVAC contractor, that is an isolated stream of federal funding tied directly to life safety systems.
Exactly. And that kind of funding will likely survive the budget slashing because it's so critical.
But the overarching trend remains, right? The serious money is migrating to privately financed PAS-ET conversions.
Right. And pivoting to PAS-ET means you're playing a completely different administrative game.
Yeah. You are no longer dealing with some slow-moving city agency that takes, 6 months to process a change order.
No, you're dealing with private equity firms and private developers who demand absolute surgical precision. They have zero tolerance for administrative fiction.
I mean, let's talk about the RFI process requests for information. When your crew opens up a wall and finds a structural issue that wasn't on the blueprints, you have to submit an RFI to get approval.
Right. On a traditional city job, that RFI might sit on a desk for 3 weeks while work just grinds to a halt.
But on a PCT job, the developer expects that RFI tracked, cost analyzed, and resolved immediately.
Yeah, if you cause a scheduled delay because an RFI got lost in your project manager's messy email inbox, the private developer will hit you with liquidated damages.
And you will eat those costs. You simply cannot manage a highly complex, hazard-filled PCT project using disorganized spreadsheets.
Exactly. The margin for error is just non-existent.
Which is precisely why your back office technology has to scale alongside your field operations. And that is where tools like Smart Business Automator become completely non-negotiable.
Yeah, when you transition to these high-stakes private contracts, Smart Business Automator deploys an AI-powered project assistant that fundamentally changes your administrative overhead.
Right, it automatically tags and sorts every permit, site photo, and submittal.
So when your estimators are handed a massive, dense stack of PCT specifications, the AI extracts the crucial details.
That way they don't miss those hidden compliance and hazard mitigation costs we discussed earlier.
Exactly. And the schedule risk detection feature is honestly what saves your profit margin.
Oh, for sure. If you are doing a $50 million building overhaul and a critical custom boiler part is delayed in shipping, the software identifies that bottleneck.
Right, and it flags the budget variance in real time. So your leadership team sees exactly how that single delay will impact the financial curve before it cascades into a disaster.
It really just allows your project managers to handle significantly more volume without drowning in the paperwork.
Yeah, if you want a piece of that $7 billion PASI-T opportunity, your administrative execution has to be as bulletproof as your concrete pours.
That is the reality of the pivot. But Nicole, before we wrap up, I want to circle back to where we started.
Okay.
Because there is a deeply uncomfortable paradox at the center of this entire discussion.
Yeah, there really is. It is something that makes you stop and think.
We have spent the last 15 minutes outlining how PASI-T conversions and project management are the financial saviors for the construction pipeline, right?
Right. Because they bring in the billions of dollars required to fix these decaying buildings when the government just cannot.
Exactly. But if we look at the tragedy at UPACA 6, the senior citizen who passed away during that freezing cold snap in February, that incident actually happened after the building was converted to private management.
Wait, really? After the conversion was done?
Yes. The private capital was legally committed, the new property management company was in place, and the money to fix the failing heating systems was supposedly there.
Oh, wow. But the promised repairs just didn't materialize in time.
Right. And a resident lost her life. It creates this massive accountability vacuum.
It really does. As the federal government steps back and private equity takes over the public housing landscape, the financial structure improves, but the execution still has to happen on the ground.
Exactly. If a private developer drags their feet on approving a critical emergency boiler replacement to save on first quarter costs, but you are the mechanical contractor officially assigned to the building who ultimately holds the liability when the system fails.
The legal and moral implications for contractors are just staggering. You are no longer just fighting for a contract, you are stepping into a life safety environment.
Right, an environment where the private management company might prioritize their financial returns over the speed of your emergency repairs.
So contractors need ironclad contracts that protect them from liability if the private equity partner refuses to authorize emergency work. The capital is flowing, but the human stakes have never been higher.
The money is there, but the execution literally has lives hanging in the balance. It is a chilling reality check for any business operating in this space.
It truly is.
Well, this infrastructure crisis is still evolving rapidly, and NYCHA's $78 billion backlog isn't going anywhere. If you know a contractor who is dealing with delayed government contracts or trying to break into NYCHA projects, send them this deep dive. It could help them pivot their pipeline to recession-proof PCT work and save their operations from the budget fallout. Hit follow on whatever app you're listening on so you don't miss tomorrow's intel. And if you want to scale your operations and manage these complex projects without the admin headache, visit smartbusinessautomator.com. Keep building, stay sharp, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.